Mayor, it is 5:15. All members are present except for Councillor Dillon and Councillor Singh at the moment.
Well, let's start since we have a quorum.
Do roll call because I've taken the roll right now.
Okay, so the first presentation is from Community Services, and for council that didn't hear what Peter Face explained before, the current schedule is presentations until 7 o'clock, and then we've got citizen deputations at 7 o'clock. And so we'll start off with Community Services.
Thank you, Mayor Brown, and to members of council. Good evening, and welcome the opportunity to present the 2021 capital budget for community services. Next slide, please. So our 2021 budget in community services, we're going to continue offering services through our partnerships, strategic opportunities, and really just continue to deliver that high quality of amenities and services and programming to our residents. You'll see that in our budget submission this year, we've got some highlights, such as some new park developments and continuing to renew our infrastructure, which is a theme that council has been very supportive of over the last number of years. Also, one of the things we're very excited about is our consultations that are currently happening surrounding the youth hubs to be located at 2 locations within the city. And then we're going to continue to promote the use of technology and make sure that we're a well-run department and a well-run city. And so one of the things that's happened with COVID, it's allowed us to accelerate some of our case studies around using remote agent technology in 311 and Service Brampton, and allowed us to just really focus on the things that will provide value add and value for money to the taxpayer. Obviously, we're going to continue to refresh our infrastructure, sort of playgrounds, community centers, and you'll see some of that sprinkled throughout the capital budget. Most of that sits in PWE, but we work with our partners in building design and constructions to get those executed. And then in our performing arts division, really they've made a renewed commitment towards engaging with the local community, engaging with stakeholders, and allowing us to grow arts in the community, which is a vital part of community services. And then finally, our real estate division, which has worked tirelessly to continue to make sure that we have the ability to execute on some of the key goals through land acquisitions and dispositions throughout the city. Next slide, please. So our budget's really driven, obviously, by the council priorities, and in a couple slides, I'll take you through some of our items that are linked to council priorities. But one of the major things that's really moving community services is the growth. We're a thriving municipality. Population is increasing year over year, and so that has really put a demand on our services and the need to grow our services and continue to meet that high-level standard. And that's both financial resources, capital resources, to allow us to meet that growth. And council has been very supportive of that, and we thank you for that. And the continued support allows us to make Brampton be one of the premier cities in terms of providing parks, recreation, performing arts, amenities throughout the GTA. Our changing demographics, and I mean, it's becoming very apparent through COVID that we look at our demographics, and we speak about Brampton really in terms of cultural diversity a lot, but one of the things that we're seeing a lot is the socioeconomic diversity as well. And so in all of our areas, specifically parks and recreation and performing arts, we continue to make sure that we have a variety of programs to meet a variety of needs for people in different economic levels, people at different age groups. We want to make sure that we have something for everybody. And so that's one of the things that we continue to challenge our teams to provide. Aging infrastructure is a key important component for us. Obviously, we need great buildings and great environments to deliver our excellent programs. And so we work with our partners in building design and construction and facility maintenance to make sure that our assets remain in a good state of repair. And our parks team does a fantastic job through their annual programs, whether it be playground replacement or pathway trail repair, to make sure that our assets continue to be top-notch, bar none. And then we continue to see build community. And one of the great things about community services and being fortunate enough to work in this department is that, we contribute very much to the community building and the civic pride of a city and a municipality. And so very grateful for the opportunity to do that. And one of the things that we continue to do is expand our 311 and service Brampton functions. We most recently the 311 mobile app, and they continue to take on more and more. The demand for information in this age of information that we live in, where people want information at the tips of their hand, means that for us here at the city, that our 311 team needs to deliver that service almost instantaneously, and they continue to meet that expectation. I would like to say that COVID-19 has had a significant impact, obviously, on us, and we continue to expect to see some of those impacts through 2021. I want to take a moment right now, to just acknowledge the hard work from my leadership team, Stephen Shipper, Don Bennett, Ed Fagan, Michelle Solsky, and Anand Patel. In all of our areas, we've been responding sometimes overnight to provincial announcements and different regulations, closings, openings in parks and recreation and performing arts, responding to some of our realty needs in terms of our tenants that we have in our building. And our team has really stepped up to the plate, and really I've been very proud to be part of the team that's really not missed a beat in terms of how we continue to try to adapt and be flexible to COVID-19. And I think acknowledging their leadership in their respective divisions is important, and we will continue to see impacts to COVID-19 throughout 2021, but I'm very confident that our team will be able to meet those needs and continue to come out the other side actually even better than we entered with COVID-19. The last piece on changing seasonal weather patterns is really just a nod to the fact that our infrastructure and equipment continues to be used and utilized more than probably 10, 15, 20 years ago, as we have global warming and as we see that the seasons last longer, the snow comes in a little bit later, the cold weather comes in a little bit later. We keep our outdoor assets open a little bit longer to allow people to play soccer for a little bit longer, or be on that trail or outdoor fitness equipment. And so that will continue to be a theme we expect, is that our equipment and our amenities in parks especially will continue to be utilized more as global warming continues. Next slide, please. Very briefly, I'll take you through, I'm not going to take you through every one of the term of council priorities and how we align, but a couple I think that I'd like to highlight is really, in terms of the council priority of opportunities, we really are looking to develop and integrate our community facilities. And one of the things that we've been doing very well in community services is partnering, whether it be with the region, whether it be with the school boards, in terms of making sure that our facilities, we're maximizing the value of our facilities and working with on joint projects with partners in the community. And so we're very proud of that. We're also very proud of the green initiatives we have. So the 1 million tree program in terms of planting trees, and then some of the program, the urban forestry master plan that is beginning to get developed and working on right now to create that green framework that allows us to ensure that Brampton doesn't become a concrete jungle, but it maintains some of the greenery that we are so accustomed to and that citizens can enjoy. And we're very happy to continue that council priority and move that along. Next slide, please. We also, in terms of health, and Mayor Brown speaks to it a lot about the health of our city and our citizens, and diabetes and some of the things that we are challenged with in Brampton. And so in a lot of our, specifically the recreation division, working with our partners to develop programs that contribute to the health and wellness of our residents, whether that be working with Osler on something like the Cardiac Transitional Rehabilitation Program, our Active Assist program, and I do want to, again, commend council for their support for this program. We continue to see those numbers grow year after year. Active Assist, for those that are familiar, is a program that allows low-income residents to access city programs. They get a credit of $275 to access city programs, and we continue to see those numbers skyrocket. I believe this year we were at about 1.3 million, and so that's a great initiative that council continues to support to allow accessibility to our residents. And we could, as I said previously, we want to be a well-run city, and so the ability to implement the renewal strategy on our recreation centers across the city. We're happy on some of the things that have just recently been accomplished and some of the projects that are on the table that are within the 2021 budget, 2022, 2023. We think that Brampton will continue to be a leader in terms of community center infrastructure, parks infrastructure, performing arts infrastructure, and so we're happy about that. And then the Mosaic term of council priority, obviously our youth hubs. We're very excited to be in the consultation and then moving to the planning and then construction stage of those projects. Next slide, please. Our operating budget highlights, as I said before, growth continues to drive community services budget in terms of more resources, but I'm happy to say that we are doing a lot without putting a significant amount of pressure and asking for significant resources. A lot of things are done internally, and we try to reallocate and redistribute, and so you'll see that we've got only two resource asks for the entire department, one of the larger departments in the city. And in the capital budget, you'll see that the preventative maintenance transferred to the capital budget drives some significant savings in the operating budget. And we also continue to ensure that user fees, and so you'll see later on that user fees, we are trying to keep user fees low to no growth, and we haven't put forth any increases in user fees because we know these are challenging times and we want to continue access to our amenities. Next slide, please. So the overview of the community services budget overall I won't go through this too much in depth. 110 million in expenditures and revenues. About a third of our revenues come from user fees and service charges. The rest from property taxes. We feel that is the services that the residents receive from community services are top notch across the GTA, and then we do that efficiently and effectively for value for money. Next slide, please. Just a few capital budget highlights. I won't go through the list because they're right there before you, but we are excited about the outdoor amenities and coming to the Gore Meadows area in terms of additional cricket, soccer, activity hubs. We feel like that is going to provide a great amount of activity and health, recreation, and parks amenities in the northeast part of the city. We've got park improvements and other activity hubs and constructions. The other groups, we have just normal items in terms of equipment and replacement. So our capital budget is not huge by any stretch of the imagination. One of the things I will note is our performing arts group will be undergoing a strategic plan to continue to take a look at how they can better serve our community. And under the leadership of Stephen Shipper, they've done a great job already, as I said, about community engagement, working with the community and developing programs that are local and using and really accessing the diversity of what we have within the Brampton community. So very excited about that. Next slide, please. So our capital budget, as I said, not too significant. Parks is the major driver of that with our number of our programs and our playground replacement, new construction, new developments, and so we continue to increase the assets and the things that the residents of Brampton can access, because we want to be a balanced city and a city where people can work in, but also live in and play in. So that's very important to us. Next slide, please. So that's the end of the presentation. As I said before, I thank you very much. I'm very fortunate to work with a great leadership team and great members throughout the division, all the way down to our frontline staff who have been working hard throughout this year in sort of uncharted territory in unforeseen circumstances. And I'm very proud of our division and what we have done to continue to allow people to, in these unprecedented times, to have a little bit of recreation, a little bit of health and wellness, both mental and physical. So at this time, happy to take any questions that you may have.
Okay, I'm going to look at the chat box to see who has a question. I see the first question is from Councillor Willens. Is that correct, Peter?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Willens.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you through you, Mayor. Thank you, Derek, for your presentation. Just a quick on the line item. I think you've got it back there under the community gardens, there's 150,000 slotted for the community gardens citywide. I'd like to see, because I'd like to try and combine that community gardens with the backyard garden program that we did this year. That was pretty successful. I know we kind of flew by the seat of our pants, and I want to thank all of council for helping out on that one. The program's going to look a little different next year. I think we're going to, based on a registration format, to try and alleviate some of the missed addresses. And I know there was a couple in Councillor Bowman's and Councillor Medeiros' ward, and thank you, Councillor Medeiros, for pointing that out. We were able to accommodate. But we're going to try and alleviate that next year by maybe reducing the numbers of participants, maybe around stopping at 2,000. But we've got some sponsors that are on board. But I'd like to see if maybe if you can come back, Derek, at when we approve the budget, to see maybe if we can add another 100,000 to that community garden, or to the community garden budget, knowing that it's the community garden and the backyard garden program combined. And as I say, we do have some sponsors that are very eager to come back to it. So it may be that we may be able to build up some coffers for that and not have to have a budget item for it in years to come. But anyway, if you can come back, I don't need to have a decision or vote on it now. If you can just come back at for the approval, see what that looks like. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Councillor Willens. Next question is Councillor Polishi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, through you to Derek. Derek, looking at the operating budget overview in the terms of advertising, marketing, and promotions, with our current sponsorship team and the ability for them to utilize some of our recreation centers or anything that's in the community services purview, are those dollars that come back through the city, and do they go directly towards or can they go directly towards your operating budget, and do they go to your operating budget?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, to your question, Councillor Polishi, those, when we work with the sponsorship unit, who I must say is doing a fantastic job in terms of drumming up business and not just supporting our assets. I may just add, they also support a variety of programs that we offer as well. So sometimes those are in-kind contributions from sponsors, but the dollars, yes, when we do strike a deal, or when they do strike a deal, those numbers are added to the recreation budget to help supplement our service offerings.
So in the operating budget overview, what I would ask maybe for in the future, because I know they're doing a fantastic job. Huge kudos to that team and everything that they're doing, and I know that it's just going to get better and better. But what I'd like to see is, in terms of the revenues, the ability to offset directly other expenditures on the overview. I'd like to. I'm a little bit visual, so I'd like to see some visuals on that, maybe in the future budgets.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can definitely regroup with finance to see what they can do in future years. And I would just note that you just to realize that those would probably lag by a year, because when a deal is signed, at that point we could probably build it into the budget, but not before, because we don't know what would happen. So there would always be just a lag period. But I will work with our colleagues in finance to see how we could demonstrate that in future years.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. There's a lot of other lags that happen in other departments, so I'm 100% okay with that. In looking at this, moving on to capital budget overview now, in looking at the CAA Center, we have $2.115 million earmarked for the CAA. What are some of the big asks for coming out of that capital budget?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the big ask, about $1.6 million, is for a full roof replacement. Their roof, according to our building condition audit, is and what they're experiencing is up for repair. So I think that was actually pushed out from last year. So that's the big of that 2.1, 1.6 is there, and then the other big, or sort of the other two items that are substantial. There's about $250K for some sidewalk and curb replacements and entrance and roof replacements on the west side of the CAA Center. So a lot of what we call safety and R&R items for the CAA Center.
Okay, the roof is very. You say it was deferred out, and it sounds very new to me. Usually I have a pretty good memory, but I don't recall the discussion about the roof. Not saying that that hasn't happened. What currently, what's the lifespan of the roof, and what's been happening with that? Is it come to its lifespan? Is it the entirety of the roof, or is it structural changes or cosmetic?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Polishi. So it is the full roof replacement. I can get you follow up and get you some further specific details on that. And when I say deferred, I might have used the wrong language. I just know that that conversation had happened. It may not have been in the budget and be formally deferred, but in terms of we knew that that was coming up for replacement. But I can get further details and we can respond on the sort of the specifics on some of those questions.
Okay, thank you. And I guess with the future of the CAA, there's opportunity for discussions when it comes down to what is going to be needed to be replaced and what may not need it to be placed. Is that correct?
Sorry, you just broke up a little bit through you, Mr. Chair. Could you repeat your question, Councillor Polishi?
Sorry, Derek, in a roundabout way, I'm trying to get you to answer yes to my question. And the question is, with the future of the CAA lands, there may be opportunity for us to do the work or maybe not do the work, or there may be other opportunities, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So yeah, I'll answer your question similarly. I think that what we submit in the budget for CAA, and obviously this is my first year, but having spoken with staff, is really the things that are necessary to be done regardless of the future. And so we think that some of this work is necessary, but we will regroup on this. But I can tell you that most of the items, actually all the items in there are necessary items and not discretionary items or cosmetic.
Sure. Okay. My last thing, Derek, is what I'm going to ask of you to bring back for this budget is the opportunity for, so we're pretty good in our reserves in terms of our development charges, the funds, and the cash in lieu. What I would like to see and like to look at is maybe having an opportunity for each ward to provide something to the area that touches on the health and well-being of that area or of that community. So maybe we could have a further discussion at what that may look like. But I think that what I'd like to have the information come back is, what are some of the opportunities? What are some of the things that we are allowed to spend the reserves relating directly to development charges and cash in lieu? And if maybe I could push that off to a future discussion that we have during this budget.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Polishi, I will regroup with our colleagues in finance who will undoubtedly be able to tell us what the parameters are for spending for CIL and NDC, and then yes, we can have that conversation and take a look at what that whole picture means and sort of and those decision points.
Perfect. Thank you, Derek. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Back to you.
Okay, so the next question is Councillor Vicente.
Mr. Chair, I believe he removed his name.
Yes, I did.
Yes.
Councillor
Okay,
Santos.
then
Councillor Polishi asked my question, so I'm good.
okay, Councillor Willens missed a question?
Councillor Santos would be next.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Santos.
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair, and I know, Derek, you answered this question already offline, but just for the benefit of other councillors, I just thought that I should ask anyway. So this is just in regards to the spring, summer season, fall season of next year when the snow melts, and just making sure that we have enough money in our budget for picnic benches and shade shelters, etc., so that when people get out of their houses, they can very safely physically distance themselves when they're sitting outside. So if you just don't mind summarizing what you shared with Councillor Vicente and I, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Santos. So in our budget right now sits I'm just going to be specific. We've got currently the parks shade structure and shelter program is for 2020 has just been tendered, and so there was 500,000 allocated to that, and that's tendered, and that will start. It's been delayed this year, moving forward for COVID. We also have a $1.25 million park enhancement budget that was allocated to council last year, so 250,000 per ward pairing that could be used for additional infrastructure should you as council decide to do that within your ward pairings. And so that's 1.25 million there. And then my parks team has confirmed to me that we have additional money from previous PNs and this year's PNs with respect to picnic benches and picnic tables. So should we need more at various locations, we have a healthy amount of 125,000 within our budget that can be used for that. So in terms of picnic tables, I think we're sufficient. We can take a look at that. In terms of shade shelters and shade structures, there's a submission for 2021 of 250, but as I mentioned, there's a $1.25 million item, which is 250,000 per ward pairing that was approved last year called park enhancement money that we could also work with the various councillors to distribute that money.
Thank you so much, Derek, and thanks for your hard work on this file as acting commissioner. And that's also just a flag for my colleagues in terms of getting their lists ready for the shade shelters and the picnic benches. Thanks again, Derek.
Thank you, Councillor Santos.
Okay, the next question is Councillor Willens.
Yeah, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Derek, there's nothing. I want to just add something to that, the community garden program. Maybe we can have a look at. I'm not asking for any more money to be added, but I know that the Horticultural Society ran a recognition program for front yard gardens for flowers and shrubs and beautification of people's yards. I wonder if you can just add that in there. Maybe it would be the garden recognition program, but add that into those community garden and the backyard garden program under that same amount of funding, just so it maybe be something in there for certificates or the plaques like they used to have in the past. So just because it's kind of people really appreciate that. So it'd be nice that it came from the city as well. So, okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thank you, Derek, and to your staff. I know that you guys have gone that extra mile, really helping community and sports groups, and just sort of seeing your staff in action and seeing how you're supporting the community. Really great work. In terms of something I've talked about in previous, and when you look at for example, our equipment, and the whole discussion around, do we maintain gym equipment? Does it make sense for us to be in the business to sort of offering health equipment and run as a gym when we're really not competitive with all the sort of proliferation of gyms that exist in the city? And especially when many of us councillors are always faced with the challenge of finding new spaces. Has that been looked at on, getting sort of looking, and I'm not even sure about the state of repair of some of this equipment, but can you just talk to me a little bit about sort of the decision making of, and I understand that, the decision sometimes that would have to be sort of a policy change or something that would have to come to council, but in terms of state of repair of equipment and sort of plans going forward, what's the thinking around it? And because I think that's an area of savings that we could find, especially knowing that a lot of this equipment becomes outdated pretty quick. So just any comments regarding that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the question, Councillor Medeiros. Yes, and so that is something that we do keep an eye on. So specifically with respect to fitness equipment, we definitely ensure that we do get the best mileage that we can for our equipment. So we, as the equipment is cycled through our various community centers, so from our high use centers, it may, when it's approaching its end of life cycle, it may go to one of our lower use centers as we move forward. Philosophically, when you look at fitness centers, I do understand your question, but I just want to point out that our fitness centers really do two things. One is they present they're a different option in the community than your private facilities, and the members that use our facility use it because they want non-threatening, non-competitive, relaxing social environments to use our fitness centers. And our fitness centers themselves, where our big centers are thriving. Our fitness memberships also in the city are very inclusive. So you get the fitness center, but you also get swimming and you also get skating, and so it provides a more community and inclusive than just what I would say at some of our private, without mentioning names, at private facilities that would just, you go in, you work out, and you leave. Our fitness centers sort of provide that community benefit. Having said that, we continue to always evaluate who's using them, what are they using for, and I really like your question in terms of space. And so we have a couple of fitness centers that we are looking at, that we continue to examine to say, is there a more appropriate use of that space than a fitness center? And at that decision point, we definitely would come to council to say, here's what we're thinking. This may be a better use based on demand or what services we need to provide. But that would be specific to certain centers. And so, but rest assured, we do keep our eye on that to make sure that we're making qualified decisions.
Yeah, and through the mayor, I always use the example of South Fletcher's, having gone there and paid the day fee to sort of use the equipment, and in my mind, with the pressures that Councillor Bowman and myself feel with groups, and especially there's always new groups that pop up looking for space. I sometimes wonder from a community benefit perspective, but it's good that this is something that's constantly under review. And I do know other recreation centers. I remember last term of budget a couple of years ago that Councillor Polishi was very adamant about, I think at Casey Campbell, that the gym there is very well used, and people are using all the equipment and so on. So I'm glad that we're looking at that. My second question, Derek, at the time, a couple of years ago, there was a possibility over there off of McLaughlin, behind the government detention center, that there was land available, and that could be possibly used to put up fields and sort of create our own little place in our area where they would have turf fields, and there would be field hockey and so on. I forget the name of the specific place. Is that still going on, that negotiation? Did we purchase that land? Did we not get it? Any update?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Medeiros. Yes, so those are the lands behind the correctional facility. We had initial discussions with the province who owned that land, and they about that land, and expressed our interest to purchase those. And in fact, I believe I had spoken with Mayor Brown, and he had sent some he sent a note to the ministers to let them know that we are interested and to inquire about that. We haven't heard anything recently about that, and so it really sits with the province for them to start the process. Once they start the process, then we become one of the priority clients if they declare it surplus and move forward there. So long story short, we're keeping our eye on that, and should it become available, it is something that we are interested in, still interested in.
No, that's great, and thank you very much. And I think that's going to make a big difference, and especially will provide the necessary space, and especially in our area in Wards 3 and 4. My last question is, I guess it's always been something that gnaws at me, just from a personal perspective as a resident, but understanding sort of the challenges, is the policy of gym rentals and renting facilities, where the policy is first come, first serve. But it's first come, first serve based on availability. So there's rollover from, I guess, what you call legacy groups, or whatever the terminology is. And, for full disclosure, folks that I play Sunday morning soccer with, we've been trying to get previously space and gym times, and it's always been a difficulty understanding that's the system that we have, that we have to be the first of what's available. My only concern is not, my group or people I know withstanding, is that when you look at our population growth of 20 to 30,000 per year, there's always going to be new groups forming. And these legacy sort of agreements don't allow newer communities and newer groups to have the same opportunity to get gym rentals. So, what we do know is that if a club's been getting the same gym at Jim Archdeacon for the last 10 years, they always have the first come, first serve. So again, I just make an appeal. I don't need to move a motion that, you look at that policy, that there be more equity sort of in the system to allow newer groups to sort of have access to it. And correct me if I'm wrong, if that policy still exists, but I do appreciate what we can do to give other groups opportunity.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your comments, Councilor Medeiros, and you and I have spoken about this, so absolutely. As one of the things we spoke with Council just was delayed because of COVID is the affiliation policy that we are still working on and moving forward. Primarily, and one of the things that's great is you as a council have been very great at supporting the additional assets in the community, and so we're growing gym spaces, we're growing indoor fields, we're growing outdoor fields, we're growing indoor spaces and arenas, and so that will help take some of the pressure off. What you find, and what we've done intuitively is most of the rollover happens with our youth sports groups. So our affiliated groups that are youth sports, those are the ones that usually use our assets the same times over and over again, and we do give them priority as per our current policy. But what we've done specifically over the last number of years is really come down a little bit harder in terms of making sure as people book space that they use space, and if not, we start to penalize them. If we know a soccer field sitting empty and they've booked it, the next year we tell them we're reducing that. If your ice time is sitting empty and you've prevented somebody else from using it, we're taking it back from you and reducing it the year after that. So we've become a little bit, I would say, a little bit tougher on some of our groups to make sure that the assets are maximized, because we do recognize that, but we are definitely looking at that. And I think our new affiliation policy, it's still in draft form and hasn't come to council yet, will address some of those issues. But I still think because we're a big city, we're still going to have that more demand than supply in sort of prime time hours, but we are working hard to address that.
Great. Thank you very much, Derek, for all your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. The next question, let's see what we have here. That's all the questions. So if there's no other questions, Derek, you're off the hot seat, and thank you for your dedication to recreation. We're very proud of the recreational footprint, the growing recreational footprint in the city of Brampton. So the next presentation, if I'm correct, Peter, will be corporate support services.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, sorry.
Yes.
I just want to go back on real quick and just, it's not a motion that I'm going to put on right now, but I'd like maybe Derek to get ready, and I'm thinking about deferring all the CAA dollars to next year's budget. I'm not putting anything on right now, but that's just where I'm going right now, and I'm happy to have a further conversation with Derek and then bring it back to all of council, so all of council can make that decision as the future we go through the budget. Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair. That sounds good, Councillor Polishi. We're happy to speak with you about that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next, so we'll go on to the next presentation, corporate support services.
Commissioner Davidson, your microphone is muted. I can unmute it if you're having some. I'll go ahead and unmute your microphone. You can proceed, Commissioner.
Good evening. It's Michael Davidson. I'm the Commissioner of Corporate Support Services. Support Services has changed a number of times over the last couple of years. So I'd just like to remind the group what divisions are existing within our department. We have HR, we have finance, we have purchasing, we have IT, and we have strategic communications. So a wide diversity of different areas that we're looking at. I'm prepared tonight to come to you and talk to you about our budget goals, our operating and capital budgets, and any questions that you may further ask. Next slide, please. Our budget goals are, we are committed to providing support and service to all the departments and divisions, enabling effective and efficient service delivery through collaboration, partnership, innovation, and strategic capacity planning. That includes supporting most of our departments and divisions in navigating through the operational impacts and transformations as a result of COVID-19 pandemic to ensure excellent customer experience, both internal and external. Further to that is to support the Brampton Mosaic through multimedia relations and community engagement to improve two-way communication between the city and the residents. Effectively manage municipal assets, physical and both digital, according to the corporate asset management plan roadmap, and streamline business processes to increase operational efficiency and red tape and cycle time through automation and continuous improvement. And finally, the final business goal is to maintain security and reliable platforms for staff and the public to access the city's programs and services. Next slide, please. Our budget drivers are many in terms of they have been impacted by the COVID virus this year, requiring increased demand for technology and increased volume of work. We're significantly under always technological advances, as the change rate within the IT industry is at least 18 months at the present time. We're faced by constant growth within the city, legislative requirements, council priorities, increased demand for services, aging infrastructure, and a diverse growing population. Next slide, please. The term of council priorities are relating back to the Mosaic in terms of continuing the city's journey to implementing a Brampton's Culture Master Plan by the startup and incubation of an Arts and Culture Creative Industries Development Agency, to continue to promote and support Brampton U brand development, enhance the Brampton Walk of Fame program, and implement a public art maintenance program, increase support for Brampton's Mosaic with additional resources in multilingual media relations and community engagement, and to nurture and support the city's diverse community by delivering community grant program through the 2021 Advanced Brampton Fund ABF program. Next slide, please. To support the well-run city, we'll be working with the organization to enhance core technology management and maintenance through desktop technology reviews and refresh, core data and voice communication technology upgrade, IT data center and cloud technology will be furthering utilization of those technologies, IT security and risk management. Also supporting the well-run city is technological enhancements for better customer experience. Contactless, those would be contactless parking, Brampton mobile apps, smart kiosks, chatbots, and remote video courtroom. In implementation and upgrades for enterprise solutions, the ERP system, enterprise resource planning system of financials and human resources, transformation planning project, and email management for service level tracking and reporting. And finally, the modernize the time attendance and absence system through the implementation of MyTime. And that will go over the next 3-year period of time to have it fully implemented. Our operating budget highlights are to do more with less. Or if we look at our specifics of our operating budget, doing the same with less cost. Efficiencies and cost avoidance will be the elimination of vacant positions. We looked at the reduction of headcount as one of our prime examples of trying to bring the cost back in line as we move forward. And I believe our department actually, one division within our department actually contributed more headcount eliminations than all the rest of the organization that I know of at this point in time. Additional staff requests, though, would be one additional person, a GIS analyst, to support the new stormwater levy and the technical program delivery. The net impact, though, is $0 because it's being covered under the stormwater levy. And one other new position to support discrimination and harassment in our HR program as we move forward with that. Next slide, please. Overall, you can see that we have a reasonably healthy budget of about $60+ million, primarily occurring in the IT because of the cost of IT and the larger staff within the IT realm. It's got a bulk of the budget both on operating and capital expenditures. As you can see from that, salaries, wages, and labor are basically a majority of our expenditures, followed by professional service staff and contracted services as we move forward. Those haven't changed year over year per se. Our overall budgetary increase from year over year on labor is 1.4%, while other expenses are 0.5 negative. The revenue is gone up about 1.8%, while the total operating budget has only gone over 0.7%. Next slide, please. Some of the highlights of the capital budget program are the Nurturing in Neighborhoods program, provided under strategic communications to connect residents to resources and encourage community participation. Digital and technology enhancements for citizen-facing programs and services, contactless parking and chat box, implementation of the corporate times and attendance service called My Time, implementation of upgrades of enterprise solutions, modernization of occupational health and safety systems for better monitoring and reporting, core technology upgrades, and continue to modernize the city's offline or online presence per se. Pressures that we're facing over the next year are COVID-19, population growth, increased demand for digital services, and aging infrastructure that we currently have. The corporate overview, as I was saying, in operating expenses are weighted by having information technology to be a leading spender in our budget. We're looking for, in the 2021 budget, approximately $11,717,000 as we move forward. The next slide is, if we could move to the next slide, please. Thank you. One of the things that in terms of talking about our operating and capital budget is our communication and our communication back to our stakeholders. We've had a number of different telehalls or teleconferences with various public engagement in it for over 22 times in the last period. The last one being November 12th, where we had close to 8,000 participants in the actual calls, where we asked and put to the participants 4 questions. First question was, do you support the city's infrastructures levy, which is currently a 2% increase each year to support roads, bridges, and facilities? And the answer was no, 43%, yes, 28%, maybe 29%. Do you support a property tax increase? Resoundingly no, 79%, yes, 10%, and maybe at 11%. What is your priority for investment? Priority for investment was economic development, followed by winter maintenance, followed by road repairs, followed by recreation and parks. Finally, our last question at communication events was, do you support a hospital levy to get phase 2 of Peel Memorial built? A resounding 67% said yes, 33% said no. I'd like to open it up to the councillors and council to ask questions as they feel.
Okay, looking at the list of questions, if I'm correct, the first one is Martin Medeiros.
Thank you through you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I guess I have sort of many questions, and I guess moving from areas of HR strategy and with consulting services as well, be through corporate services, is that something that's managed, I guess, in finance? So, for example, when we were to look at how many times we've looked at, would we have a number of consulting services from all different departments and have it itemized for what consulting was used for? So that would be sort of the one which is non-discretionary and also discretionary. Is that something that is available?
We could do a report for that and get back to you very shortly on that, yes.
Yeah, if we can get sort of a ballpark figure as well, just on understanding on, just to ensure that there's alignment with, in terms of the work that we're doing, because that always seems to be sort of that every year through budget, we go through the same sort of experience and we start asking, you know, how much money did we spend on consulting? And different departments I know have different budgets, different buckets, and they use consulting services for different manners. So it would be good to sort of see an itemized based on what department and based on for what type of services. So that would be one. I guess my second one in terms of from an HR policy. So I know there's a request around the departments, and I do know there's I believe an ask for 46 right now. And I guess my question would be with, based on the year that we've had in terms of the work, so not every department has been at full sort of capacity. Some, I imagine, as much as people are working from home, and I think certain areas have been sort of more engaged, in other areas not as much, or I could be totally wrong, and productivity and sort of over the year that that COVID hasn't impacted not all business areas. So I just have, you know, I just want to make sure if we're adding 46 positions, and I know each department puts in that request, and HR, I guess, will work with them to validate the operational impact. If we were to put a freeze on those 46, do we have, is that something that would be easily to be brought forward as for us to understand what potentially the impact would be on putting a hold on all positions?
I would have to defer that off to finance to ask if we do have that information. Each of the different departments would have access to their information. Treasurer Mark, I was wondering if you could answer this question.
Sure, thank you, Michael. So from the 44 requests, I'm just pulling up the actual specifics here. The transit portion, I think, was 15 or 16. Well, let me just...
Yeah, so I do understand, Mark, just to save time for everybody, I do understand that there's operational impacts, and I think that I just want to make sure that the requests that we have from an operational perspective, there's a rationale, but some of this sort of back-end office work, I wouldn't be too supportive of, because again, the operational side, I understand the impact on residents, but some of the other stuff, I'd have to really go and pick and choose, and I don't want to get into that. And again, I know that's something that you would do. So that's why I just want to make sure that when the departments come forward and they put in these requests, because I know it's almost like a shell game with positions. Would we know, for example, from all the positions that we had from, I guess, open positions, have all of them been filled to date? Are there open positions, and what's the process? I understand if positions aren't filled in an area by a certain time, do they just remain, or do they get pulled from those departments?
So, Councillor, it's David Barrick here, through the chair. I just want to respond with respect to the 2021 budget process itself. As I indicated earlier, we are not budgeting for the emergency purposes. That is because to not have those wild swings or play the guessing game in terms of what our revenues will be in community services, recreation, and transit, et cetera. So we have a strategy for that I outlined early in this budget process. With respect to the vacancies question, so yes, 2020, we didn't budget for an emergency either, and here we are. So one of the strategies that we took, adopted early, was to hold back on the vacancies. When a position became available, we just didn't fill it. So the short answer is yes, there's about 70 or so vacancies. It could be less than that right now. That was the last number I saw at the beginning of October. But that's by design to help offset the hit that the municipality is taking in 2020 because of the emergency, so the loss of revenue. And I believe that is stated in the QT report that you have before you as part of this as well. It's about $70 million impact, and we've saved as a municipality $35 million through gapping, and that gapping is through not filling those vacancies, all of them. And so that certainly had an impact on the staff that have remained here. And so leading into 2021, the anticipation is that, yes, those would get filled. And yes, the ones that are being requested through this budget process are predominantly operational in nature. And if part of the questions are with respect to, the road to zero, in other words, I know this presentation speaks to a recommendation of 2%. We will also demonstrate a path for you to consider to get to zero, if that helps, and then happy to consider all these questions at that time.
Okay, no, that's very helpful. Thank you very much, David. So that's very helpful. And I guess lastly to our commissioner, I guess from again from the HR sort of perspective, when we're looking at recruitment policy, when we're looking at the type of salaries we're paying, there used to be a running joke that we would just pinch from Mississauga, especially executive management, because they would all leave there to come to Brampton because we paid more. And there seemed to be that sort of understanding across, especially the GTA area, that Brampton salaries were significantly higher than others. Have we ever benchmarked in terms of what we pay so residents understand that, are we competitive? Are we trying to flatten or trying to put the pressures down? I do know from a positive perspective, we do have sort of stable labor bargaining agreements longer term. So, that is significant. But can you speak to, for example, a director at the City of Brampton for the same title on average is the same bandwidth as it would be in Mississauga or in Vaughan? Would you have that information?
I would say that it's comparable, but I could get more accurate information if Sandeep from Human Resources could answer that question.
Sure. Thank you, Michael. And through you, Chair, to Councillor Medeiros. We do benchmarking regularly, and depending on the positions, we make sure that we can be as competitive as possible. If you would like a proper scan of all executive positions, we could do that. But I do feel comfortable saying that no, we try to be as market competitive as possible. Doesn't necessarily mean we exceed our comparator organizations. It's part of our talent attraction strategy.
Okay, no, thank you. And that's helpful. If there's any sort of background note, just to see, again, you know, when we, back when I started in 2014, it was very common all our executive management had come from Mississauga, in which I'm not saying in a negative sense. It just seemed the salaries were higher here. So it would be great to just understand that from a benchmarking perspective, that we're, as much as we want to recruit talent, we're also not going abroad. My last question, and this might be a strange question, I'm not sure if we can, but one of the knocks I've always had about, and what we heard from our residents, is that young people from Brampton or even Brampton residents never had opportunity to work at City Hall. And it's not to say that it's discriminatory against those who are outside of Brampton, and by no means do I sort of feel that those who are outside of Brampton are not given the same respect, or those who are from. But what I've always heard, and that when we're hiring, and I don't know what type of policy, I'm sure we don't have an official policy, but I've always felt that that's always been an issue where, especially from our executive management perspective, especially when we're looking at giving opportunities for young people, that we, for example, would promote and really want the brightest talent. And when we talk about the best and the brightest talent coming from Brampton, based on all the sort of messages that we say, yet I sometimes feel that there seems to be not that reflection in our hiring practices, that we're getting sort of good qualified people from a local talent. And I know this may be politically incorrect to say, but you know, to a certain degree, being born and raised in Brampton and being that one person who I remember trying to get into city of Brampton to work there, and it was almost impossible. It was about who you knew, what you knew, and how. Can you talk to me about, you know, in terms of how are we recruiting, how are we ensuring that there's opportunity for all, and you know, in terms of diversifying our workforce as well. You know, and again, I don't want to take everyone's time. Maybe that you can provide us that sort of, if there's a note which speaks to our HR strategy, which highlights some interesting data in terms of, you know, some type of profile that would be of interest. So if you feel comfortable to speak to it now, or if you just want time and give us a note after, I'm fine with that as well.
Through the mayor, if I may, to Councillor Medeiros, absolutely, we'll provide you something more detailed. But a couple of comments that may be relevant, given that mayor had given direction to the HR department to come back with a youth strategy specifically around recruitment. So that is a program that we are working on and hope to bring to you in January of 2021. Besides that, we do share recruitment of youth primarily through our departments. Most of the part-time, actually all of the part-time hiring happens through departments as compared to HR. So we're also looking at what approaches and how can we make that consistent across different departments. We don't have a systematic review of every position and whether the winning candidate is from Brampton or not. But in a rare case where we did become aware of that, we have absolutely paid attention to make sure that there was a greater advertisement and reach out to Bramptonians, and also then consideration during the recruitment selection process. Absolutely looking forward to present to you how we're working on diversifying the workforce and making sure equitable opportunities are offered to our youth, so that we can keep top talent and engage them within City Hall.
Great. Thank you very much. That's suffice, and I look forward to the information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Medeiros. Next up is Councillor Polishi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'll start by saying, you know, I think that you know, our staff are doing a tremendous job right now under the what we're all going through. Everybody has really stepped up, and I think you know, if you look at other municipalities right now, we're getting a lot of kudos by a lot of people in terms of what Brampton's been able to achieve during this whole pandemic. Mr. Davidson, if you don't know, you're about to. This is where I kind of pick apart IT because it's my nemesis. Patrick, can I get you to mute your mic? And the reason why I do that is probably because I'm getting older and I don't fully understand, you know, the technology aspect of everything. I understand that we have to put in money as ever changing the technology and upgrading and refreshing and the housekeeping aspect of it. But it's the dollars and cents that are so high in terms of, you know, whenever we're talking about the data center or cloud technology, and I'm being told by, you know, people that are in the profession that it doesn't have to be that expensive anymore. So I vaguely recall us, I think we were talking about doing kind of a review, an IT review, across the corporation to see if it's kind of like a part of the value for money. Are you aware of that value for money or review that we did in IT?
I heard of it. I haven't read the document, no. But I understand that it was done approximately 2 years ago.
Correct. So I'm just kind of wondering, you know, maybe some of the things that came out of that in terms of what we could be looking at, what is something that could be potentially outsourced if it's cheaper for the municipality to outsource. Maybe that's something we can look into and bring that back later in the budget, in terms of what that report actually outlined.
That would be quite possible, Michael, that we have some items that are basically in need of repair because we made some choices a number of years ago to go ahead and not upgrade a number of systems. So we're at the point in the next operational year in 2021 to need to upgrade some of these systems because we cannot get any added extra functionality that is required by the business to do it unless we upgrade them. One of the things that's done differently now, if you implement a system, as it was, say, 5 to 10 to 15 years ago, was to make modifications to your system to make it work well for the business as opposed to changing some of the business. The effective fallout of that is that it's going to cost you more in the end, and you'll have more outage time to upgrade the system because you have to map in all those changes. I heard a number in the thousands of changes that was made when the original systems were put in, and it took a number of years to get those changes actually made. So we have some opportunities within the next 12 to 24 months to look at how we can implement changes to the system and do it so that we don't impact the effectiveness and efficiency of the organization. But there are some things that have to be changed, and it's on a regular basis because they do either get outdated or they've been put in with too many changes, and we have to replace them if we want to upgrade any software or hardware going forward.
I think, and that you bring up a good point. I think that if we have that information at our fingertips when we're going through the budget, then we don't necessarily need to say, you know, when it comes 2021 and 2022, and I call on you to say, hey, me again, let's see what we can do in IT. I already have the information that, you know, the $1.1 million that was put into the ERP transformation planning projects was due to this, and so I guess we can call it a life cycle or next opportunity for upgrade is this. So maybe if I have that, if members of council have that information, I think that would be somewhat beneficial. On
I could sit down, excuse me, sorry, Councillor, I could sit down and describe to all the councillors where we think that there's some issues. By the end of this tactical year, we'll be able to give you a complete rollout of what systems have to be upgraded for sure in terms of problems that were going to occur. The problems with the ERP system are basically that we cannot upgrade it at this present point in time. We have to basically go in and replace it and put all the upgrades and patches in place. That's the major one that I could see for the next year.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. What I would recommend that we could easily do is set up for council just a review of the various systems as we have them at this point in time. And if we can, we would bring this into the budget meetings.
I think that would be beneficial. I think you would have to be a little bit careful, and I'm just referring to myself. I'm not going to get a lot of, in terms of the technology aspect of things. I would probably look down the line or over virtually at Councillor Dillon to see, as this is a lot of his in his background, but maybe there's definitely I think there's opportunity for further discussion and to see what those discussions look like. The one, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just about to say, excuse me, that the more communication, the better.
For sure. Mobile inspect buildings and various, and I don't know if Rick Kennard's on the line if he wants to jump in, but I was under the impression the last time when we talked about this last month, this was, I thought from my questions, there was dollars that were already in previous budgets that were allocated to the mobile inspect systems, and it was for building. I see a mobile inspect for fire, and I don't know what that is, but if you or if Rick wants to touch on the mobile inspect and the dollars that are going along with that.
Through the chair, it's Richard. Rick, unfortunately, had to step out for a personal matter between 6 and 7. But we can certainly get that information for you, Councillor Polishi.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. What about mobile inspect for fire and various? What is that?
Through the chair, I'm not sure what that one is.
Through the chair, Councillor Polishi, it's Bill Boyes. I'm happy to jump in. If that's okay.
Hey, Chief.
Yes, the mobile inspect is a similar operating platform that our building inspectors and so forth use, so that when our fire prevention officers are out in the field, they're able to do their inspections and their data collection mobile. And there's a lot of efficiencies in how quickly they can do it rather than going back to the office or going from one location to another location. So it's catching up with some of the other areas of the city and essentially using the same type of platform for our fire prevention officers.
Oh, it's for the fire prevention side of it.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, it provides them information on a handheld device.
Yes, it's on a device. It's the platform and I guess for lack of a better word, the software program that they can use and input all the data that is then linked back to with our system. I believe it's Amanda that it's called, and building uses a similar one. And that way it allows them to quickly get that put in on scene and then bring up information as they need it, and then go on to the next inspection without having to transfer it into, let's say, a paper form, and then go back to the office and then input it into the Amanda system.
Okay, so Bill, I understand we want to be uppity on the technology side of it. I didn't realize that and maybe you can talk about it because I really don't know. I recall inspections weren't an everyday occurrce like our building officials where they're out there every day, but from that side of it, are our inspectors out there constantly every day? They don't have time. Well, they do because we tell them to, but we would rather them out full time.
Yeah, well, it increases the downtime that they would have to come back, sorry, through the chair. It increases the downtime or decreases the downtime where they can do that data collection in the field. And they are out there a lot. We've seen increasing files in fire prevention year over year, and we're continuing to see that in all different types of occupancies as we respond to any requests or complaints related to fire inspections across, again, businesses and institutions and commercial properties and residential properties and so forth. So yeah, they are quite busy, and it's year over year. They are out there on literally a daily basis.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Chief. The next question I had was the remote video control courtroom ×6. What are those for?
I would have to move that over to our treasurer, Mark Medeiros.
Or Peter? Sounds like a Peter Fay thing.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
It could be.
This is a matter that's under court administration, and I believe Jane Yacobucci is on the line, who's the court manager, and perhaps she would probably have specifics on this project to supplement whatever the finance may have to say.
Through the chair to Councillor Medeiros, it's Jane Yacobucci, Manager of Court Administration. This is a project to allow for video court appearances within our courts during the COVID-19 pandemic. As many are aware, we have not been able to have in-person court appearances since March 16th of 2020, and that will continue until at least January 22nd of 2021. The direction from the Ministry of the Attorney General and the Ontario Court of Justice is that when court appearances do start up, they are suggesting that they be video court appearances. So we are seeking to have our courtrooms outfitted for video court appearances. We're currently doing audio, but that just allows for early resolution and speak to and first appearances. It does not allow for trials to be held by audio. So to be able to hold trials, we are looking to technology to allow for video court appearances.
Okay, thank you. I understand that now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. One of the last questions I had was the web chameleon. I don't recognize that. Can somebody explain the web chameleon to me?
CIO, could you please respond to the councillor?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if it's okay. It's Kathy Duncan with Animal Services.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks. So Web Chameleon is we have a software application that the shelter uses for everything called Chameleon. And Web Chameleon is a web-based version of that. We've had challenges implementing the use of the desktop version of Chameleon in the field. And so Web Chameleon will allow us to more effectively use Chameleon in the field for those services, as well as in the shelter as staff travel around throughout the shelter from mobile devices to do things such as update medical treatments on animals in the shelter or update the files in real time with respect to what the officers are doing in the field.
Okay, so it's a connection with the field officers as well?
Yes, both can use it.
Okay. Is there no opportunity we can piggyback off of something like Amanda or with the mobile inspect?
Chameleon is a product that we've had in use for over, I believe it's 15 years in the shelter. It's completely dedicated to animal sheltering, so it allows us to connect all of the medical related files for the animals that come into our care to the people that we deal with, to the activities and things that we do in the field, as well as it has a point of sale system. It also has a donation tracker. It allows us to manage our volunteers and our staffing. Okay,
then maybe that's something we can use in building instead at that dollar price. Thank you, Kathy, so much. My last question through you, Mr. Mayor, to the to corporate services. I would like a breakdown of the additional technology requirements citywide various for $450,000, if we can have that come back.
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Polishi. And you're right, that is an annual budget tradition for you to ask questions about IT. Nothing would have been expected differently. Our next question is Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Mayor. Michael, I don't know, I know you've been here a very short time, so I don't know if you'll have answers to some of these questions. So, but I'll throw them out there anyways. You know, I have an issue. Each year we seem to do the same thing. We move staff around, we move projects around, and I understand there's reasons for that, but it makes it very difficult when we're comparing year-over-year budgets to see where the actual changes in the budgets are. So in the 2020 capital forecast budget, we had forecasted $9,752,000 for the 2021 budget. But in the new 2021 budget book, we're now at $13,289,000. So, and again, in 2020, we had forecasted $7,829,000. And in this budget for 2022, we're now at $10,776,000. So where are these additional $1 million expenditures coming from that we were not able to forecast just last year?
Basically, excuse me, through the chair, the basic amounts are what's known at the point of time. So for 2019 and 2020, you're estimating what the outlook of the future budget requests are going to be. They are going as a downward pattern unless there's additional resources or dollar numbers being required to support those programs. It's always hopefully going to be in that format that it's going down as you look out farther. But you will add extra projects, you will add extra requests as you go forward in time, so that they'll fill in, and that's where the extra dollars will come from, generally extra requests. One of the things that I should say too is that the budget for, say, the IT side of the business is almost a shared responsibility, as you saw in terms of the responses to the last number of questions. They come from the actual business units that are sharing the responsibility of those projects, and working with them, we try and resolve that and bring it forward. Costs for purchasing hardware, software is put it in one budget, in the IT budget, but it may be used in the actual business units. Where do you represent that? At this point in time, we're putting it in the IT budget right now. It could just as easily move out to the different business units, so you could end up seeing where it's actually being used. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does, Michael, and I know you weren't here for this last budget, but I mean, we're looking at about a 45% increase from what we predicted last year to what the budget ask is this year. And in any business, that would be questionable when you have a 45% increase in your anticipated budget. So I'll leave that as it may. Also, I got an answer from Mark on one question that I had in the last budget session, and that was on the transfer journals made between departments. Now, corporate services actually had a transfer to the office of the CAO for $650,000. What was that transfer, or who was that transfer?
I would have to move that over to the treasurer to respond on that.
Thank you, Michael, and through the chair to Councillor Bowman. Don't have the specific details of exactly what the transfers are. We just kind of compiled the amounts, but we can definitely get that to you quickly. In addition to that, I just wanted to kind of comment on the last question. So the 2021 budget overall for the entire city last year was projected at 592 million. That was the capital budget. So this year's is at 460, so it's a decrease of 130 million overall from last year, and that was actually put together in the pre-budget questions, and it was on page, it was appendix 1 of the pre-budget questions, where we basically listed every single project that varied from last year. So it's fairly detailed, and I just wanted to highlight that we have that there, and we can definitely get you the explanation of what that specific transfer journal was.
Okay, yeah, Mark, because I'm looking at an actual increase in of 45% in what we had planned. So I'll try and find that in the appendix. But yeah, and if you can just tell me the reason I asked about the transfer journals was because I'm trying to figure out is it bodies and their salaries and benefits that we have moved in the transfer journals, or is it project-based that we didn't get a project done in, say, planning, so we moved that money into a new project in a different department? That's what I'm sort of trying to find when I'm asking for the transfer journal. So, you know, 650 grand's a lot of money. So if you can get that for me, that's okay. That's good, Mark. Thanks. Michael, can you go back to that slide that had the town hall questionnaires on it?
Yes, right there.
And I don't think it would be a budget if I didn't complain about questionnaires that we do in polls, because you can read these polls any way you like, unfortunately. I just find the answers to question number 2 and question number 4 kind of funny, because we asked people, do you support a property tax increase? 80% say no. But do you support a hospital levy, which is a tax increase? 70% say yes. So I think we need to be a little careful when we put these questions out so that people really understand what we're asking. You know, hospital levy is a tax, and you know, we went through a number of years, past 2 councils went through a number of years where we had that hospital levy on, and there was always questions about it. So you know, in future, when we do these public engagement town halls, if we can sort of keep the language, and I guess this would be through Jason's group, if we can just keep the language sort of similar so that people really understand what the question is and what they're voting on, that would be a big help for me. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Through the chair, if I could just add, we received information on that transfer journal, Councillor Bowman, and it's basically staff movements through the reorg. So okay. It's actually, yeah.
No, I was just wondering, you know, Mark, do you know, I'm not asking for name of the staff, but did we move like a little department right into the CAOs from corporate services? Is that what it is?
These particular transfers would be movements of staff between cost centers. So it's basically sections within areas that were reorganized. So for example, if somebody was paid out of a given cost center, it was determined that that function was better served at another cost center, that's where these transfers take place. So this is individual people moving cost centers.
Okay, so that leads me to another question. Mark thought I was done, sorry. So is this transfer journal that you've provided to council just people, or is it any project related transfers of capital as well?
It's a combination of both. So the dollars usually follow the staff. So if there's a specific function that that somebody is delivering and they have dollars tied to that from an other expenditure perspective, whether it be mileage or contracted services or staff development, that will go with the staff. So everything moves together.
Okay, it's just because if you look at this, and it, you know, it's very short, but we've got, geez, what, almost half of that total transfer from other departments moving into the CAO office. So, you know, that's why I question things like that, what those responsibilities were and what those cost centers were. So, but thank you very much for finding that out for me. Appreciate it.
So David Barrick here as well. I just want to close the loop if I can on the Office of the CAO questions. Council may recall, in fact, the Office of the CAO was really one of the largest operating departments in the city. And so, in fact, the Office of the CAO is much smaller and more nimble now. The strategic communications, the clerk's office, HR, we're all in the Office of the CAO, and they've been since moved to another area. So I certainly do appreciate some of these journal entry questions, but certainly the gross size of the budget, the gross staffing complement has phenomenally been reduced and much more focused.
Thanks. Back to you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bowman. Councillor Fortini is next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm glad Councillor Bowman asked. I was going to ask the same thing. You know, you get 79% says no, but then on the opposite side, on the hospital, they say yes. Maybe the question should have said, do you want a zero? Do you want to increase your tax this year for zero, or well, for a 5 or 10% the following year? I just lost connection when Councillor Medeiros was asking, I think, HR, are we getting a list? I kind of lost it there, of consultants, all the fees? Is that what I understood? To HR?
Through the mayor to Councillor Fortini, I believe that Michael did say that yes, we will provide you a list working with finance, an itemized list of the consultants.
Okay, that's great. One thing, another question, I think, to Mark, you know, we did all these town halls, which was really great. We kept our people engaged. The mayor's done an amazing job. I don't see this on the line, what they cost, all these town halls we were having. Couldn't find it in the binder. Where would that go under?
Through the chair to Councillor Fortini, I believe those costs are paid through strategic communications, so there would be existing base budgets within Jason Tamming's area, and that's where they would pay them out of existing dollars.
Great, thank you. And that, I know you sent me that question there about the non-union. So is it 1.9 million or is it 2.8? Like I'm over here, 2.5. Sorry, increase.
2.5.
It's 2.5. That's that's only for this year, right? 2021. Yeah, 2021. So that does include 2022.
Correct.
And that's only management, not part. It doesn't include part-timers. That's only management, right?
Correct.
Management and councillors.
Correct. It is through the chair. That's non-union full-time staff.
Okay, so I guess I'll keep my motion for now. We'll see how the taxes go. If we can bring a decrease and bring it down to zero like the mayor and all of us trying to do, then we might have to put this in and have a freeze for the next year. And because $2.5 million is 0.5% on everyone's property tax. So I'll wait for that until the end and see how we do, and hoping we can bring it down to zero and just keep everything the way it is. And thank you to the mayor and everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fortini, for always looking at ways to minimize the tax impact on residents. The more creative ideas, the better, and appreciate your creativity. Councillor Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Michael, quick question for you. I've received a number of inquiries from residents in regards to some of the new positions being recommended in the budget, and seeing how they come under HR. I was wondering if you can advise how many positions, particularly roles of managers, that have been filled without any competition, and is there still a transparent hiring process in place?
Sandeep, could you handle that question, please?
Sure, Michael. Through the chair to Councillor Dillon, just to clarify, are you asking about the new positions, the 42 that are being asked, or are you asking for 2020 numbers?
Well, I'm asking in relation to the new positions that are coming up. some residents have reached out and said there were some positions that were some physicians or roles that were filled without competition. So I'm just wondering, how many roles, particularly from the manager side, have been filled without competition. So 2020, and looking forward, do we still have a transparent hiring process in place for the new hires?
Yes, thank you for the clarification. And through you, Chair, I don't have the exact numbers, but I can tell you that it is an extremely rare occurrence that any position, management or not, does not go through a competitive process. As part of the policy, which really values and puts transparency as one of its key principles, it is embedded within the policy certain conditions under which a manager or a hiring manager can make a decision or recommendation to appoint a person as compared to go through a competitive process. Under those circumstances, when a hiring manager has legitimate reasons as per the policy, it still goes through approval from the commissioner of that respective OD, HR, myself, and the CEO.
Right. There were 2 directors that were filled. The positions were filled without job posting and competition, rather. And again, some of the inquiries that were made to me in regards to those. So I thought I would just ask. And so the last question is, we do have a transparent hiring process, though. Nothing has changed. Is that correct?
That is correct. The only change that was implemented in January 1st of 2020 was around the hiring of relatives, where new clauses were put in based on the direction from council, such that no senior manager and above at the organization can have a relative employed at the city. And secondly, no employee of HR can have a relative employed at the city, except that it was a clause for moving forward and the past employees and relatives were grandfathered. No other changes have been made.
Thanks for your answer.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Dylan, and that covers all the questions. Now I'm looking at the time. It's 6:51, and we have public delegations at 7 o'clock. So probably not enough time to start the next departmental review. Peter, do we have any of the deputations ready earlier? We could start with them.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we could. All the delegations are present and waiting to participate in the meeting. So if you wish, we could proceed with the delegations.
If you could tell them that we'll start early. I'll just say one comment about the last presentation before we hear the deputations. I just wanted to note that as someone who has always studied polling, that last question is interesting about would a levy be supported for Peel Memorial? Because we have asked that question a number of times. We asked it last year. We asked it in the first budget at Town Hall, and it was always no. And this is the first time it's changed. And I think the fair share for Brampton healthcare campaign that all of council was behind really gave people an understanding of the inequity that exists. And of course, COVID has put a greater attention on healthcare. And so, the numbers in every category were almost identical the previous years in terms of the public response, and that was the one exception. And so when public opinion changes that dramatically, it shows that there is a different perspective. So I just found that interesting about the levy for Peel Memorial, that there is a mandate to this council from the city if once that hospital ask comes in. It hasn't come in yet officially, but when it comes in, it appears like there's a willingness to the public to have a levy. So I just found that interesting. So we have 3 public delegations tonight, Vanessa White and Glenn Williams and Todd Letts from the Board of Trade, and then we'll have Azad Goyet, a Brampton resident, and then Jasmine Moulton, the Ontario Director of Canadian Taxpayers Federation. So why don't we start with Vanessa White, Glenn Williams, and Todd Letts from the Brampton Board of Trade.
So Vanessa, Glenn, and Todd, you are in the session now. We have your presentation on the screen and you can proceed. You can just unmute your mic.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. This is Vanessa White. I'm chair of the board and CHRO with Maple Lodge Farms. And as they mentioned, with me today is Glenn Williams of Williams Accounting, who's also our Policy and Government Relations Committee chair, and Todd Letts, our CEO. I understand we only have about 5 minutes, so I'm going to stay up front. We may need a short extension. I expect we're going to be quite aligned with what we just saw on the last slide about the engagement from the November town hall meeting in terms of our recommendations. Brampton's business community, as everyone knows, is in the middle of its second lockdown this year, and that's put many businesses in very precarious positions. Revenue streams have been compromised, yet we're looking, city staff has recommended a property tax increase. This will be very difficult to accommodate for many. At the same time, our community continues to grow in population. Our challenge, as both private sector and public sector, is to attract more business investment, industrial and commercial, so that we can retain and grow the number of jobs. As such, our recommendations today are twofold. Build Brampton's competitive advantage, and there I would say we need to focus on amending the budget process and the assumptions, as well as pausing reserve contribution increases, and reduce the proposed property tax increase, specifically providing small business property tax relief. Our business volunteers have reviewed the budget documents and have submitted a dozen or so preliminary questions, and we'd like to thank Mark Medeiros for his response to those. I will ask Glenn now to take us through our preliminary recommendations and some associated comments and questions.
Good evening, Council and councillors. Budgets are an important tool not only to manage staff performance, but also to build long-term comparative advantage. For Brampton to succeed in a competition for jobs, investment, and talent, Brampton must outperform on a number of factors. We need to be convenient. We need convenient, reliable transit, fast building permit and development approvals, incubation of innovative ideas, and investment in infrastructure that add to the health, safety, and quality of life of its residents are just a few. Competitive tax rates are critical to the success of attracting and retaining businesses in Brampton. Right now, according to the 2019 BMA Municipal Benchmark Study, we know Brampton's taxes remain higher than our comparison municipalities. As such, we reviewed the budget at a high level, and in the spirit of building Brampton's competitive advantage, have 3 preliminary recommendations. Amend the budget process and assumptions, and many of these are forward-looking because we do know we're in the middle of this year's budget process. Pause reserve contribution increases, and provide small business property tax relief. In regards to the budget process and assumptions, we note that the budget details were only made available 3 days ago. How is council or the public to make informed decisions with so little time to look at the detailed cost centers? We look forward to a time when the budget and the cost center details are released 3 weeks before the formal budget committee meetings to allow a full review. Brampton has won awards for its process in the past, and we look forward to returning to a more robust public consultation process. In regards to some of the assumptions, we noticed in transit that the revenues were projected to be 87 million, even though we know the 2020 actuals are likely to be 45 million. And we have learned that the basic assumption of the budget is that there are no impacts of COVID. It's as if nothing was happening. Does that seem reasonable? In effect, we have a view that it defeats the purpose of budgeting if management doesn't make realistic revenue and expenditure projections. Without those parameters, how can you measure performance? Why aren't municipal employees being asked to look at how they're spending their money against what they think is going to happen next year? We're concerned there'll be increased expenditures because we've got budgets there which really aren't going to get spent because of COVID. A more prudent approach would be to require staff to make a more realistic revenue and expenditure projections and live within those means. That's how business and how our families' budgets are prepared. We know it's too late now to make changes on that assumption, but council needs to ask staff seriously, how are you going to manage next year when you know you will not perform according to the budget? That's a question that's left out there, which we really hope that can be answered. We also notice in this year's budget that there's no longer a 3-year projection. Again, we're encouraging council to return to the practice in next year's budget process. We also encourage that the capital budget process be extended to be a 10-year capital budget, not just 3. And the reason that needs to be done is illustrated by the recent federal funding approval for Riverwalk. We know a budget amendment is forthcoming, but these large strategic projects should already be part of a long-term capital plan. We should not need to add $100 million projects by amending budgets every time a senior government releases a media release saying there's new funding. And specifically, we do encourage council, as we have done in the past, to create a strategic economic development infrastructure fund. We need to plan for projects like the LRT to downtown and a 3rd hospital. We need to demonstrate to the province and federal government that we, in our budget, are ready for their investment. In regards to the reserve fund contributions, Brampton is in a strong financial position. With so many businesses and families in a precarious position due to the pandemic, now is not the time to increase property taxes. It's just not necessary. As evidenced in our evidence of our financial strength is at the end of 2019, Brampton had over $1 billion in cash and investments. We have a AAA credit rating. We've got over $800 million of unspent capital. With the approval of the 2021 capital budget, the unspent capital is going to be over $1 billion come January the 1st. We also noticed in the budget that we shifted 1.8% of expenditures of preventative maintenance over to capital projects. We see that the internal debt repayments are being stopped with a 0.6% increase. Just as BBOT has, Board of Trade has suggested in the past, the contributions to reserves may already be sufficient, allowing council to stop overtaxing our residents. Further evidence of the financial strength includes comparing us, as the CAO did, to Mississauga, Peel, York, Ottawa, and Hamilton. Brampton contributes more to reserves as a percentage of other revenue than these other municipalities. In 2020, a record amount was contributed to reserves. We also see that the corporate asset management plan is going to be updated in 2021. Based on our strength and the tough situation taxpayers are in due to COVID-19, the Brampton Board of Trade recommends that the reserve contributions be paused this year. Brampton can afford to give taxpayers a break. And the last point we want to bring up today is small business tax relief. Lastly, we're pleased to see that the municipal property tax relief announcement in the provincial budget. If passed, the province will provide municipalities with a powerful tool to extend real and significant tax relief for small, medium-sized enterprises. We ask that the city do all that it can to administer these measures promptly to reduce property taxes on our businesses. Thank you for your time, and we are open to questions.
Well, thank you for the presentation. And let me say it's always welcome to have this deputation from the Board of Trade as a key stakeholder in the city. Just one question to give the staff a chance. Maybe Mark Medeiros from Finance, in terms of the question about adequate notice so they can respond. Have we done anything different this year in terms of the notice periods, in terms of the budget? If you could just help clarify that.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
You have a list of speakers?
Yes.
Are we going to the list?
Yeah, I wanted to give the opportunity to clarify that to staff.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Mark?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, in responding to the question, and thank you to the members of the Board of Trade. Like we're always open to ideas to help us improve. So appreciate all the comments. There was typically we do get the cost center details posted probably about a week earlier than we did this year. We did have a technical glitch, and on top of that, we were really striving to get the Q3 numbers updated. So in the past, we typically provide that information with Q2 data. So we were really trying to get the most recent data in front of council in Q3, and we ran into a little bit of a hiccup. So that's why that happened. But we definitely agree with what the Brampton Board of Trade has said, and we will make sure next year that we improve, and we'll try to get it out at the same time at budget binder. That's a great idea.
Okay, thank you, Mark. And Councillor Polishi, I see what you're referring to. I was confused for a second. I think you felt that was going to Marta Medeiros before you, because you were first on the speakers list. I was actually going to Mark Medeiros from Finance for that clarification of what the Board of Trade asked. Having two Medeiroses at one meeting can be confusing. Councillor Polishi, you are next.
Let's go with that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I guess back to Mark Medeiros, and thank you, Glenn, for coming in and delegating. It's always a pleasure seeing you. I wish we could see you in person like so many years before. You're always here in front of us delegating at this time, and we really do greatly appreciate it. In terms of one of your, I think, questions around the 3-year horizon, did you say that we do not do the 3-year horizon? Because I have a budget summary of the 3-year horizon, and if you maybe, Glenn, could first touch on kind of what I'm seeing in terms of the 2021 to 2023 budget summary, in terms of what you're speaking about.
I think when I looked at the budget binder, if you will, I certainly saw on the capital side where there was 3 years worth of capital, and unless I missed it, I didn't see that there was a 2022-2023 operating budget there. If it is there, that's simply I didn't have enough time to read the full document. I'm not sure. Maybe I missed it, but I didn't think I saw it.
Okay. Thank you, Glenn, for that. Mr. Medeiros, can you just touch on that? What have we? Is there a 2021 to 2023 budget summary for operating? If not, why did we choose to make it to go this different route this budget?
Through the chair, we do have a 3-year very high level estimate in the operating overview section under operating -7. We basically show 2022 and 2023 as 5% tax increases, 2% being on inflation, and 3% for the levies. So, our high level approach is to say that we need about 5% a year, including 3% of infrastructure and transit contributions. In terms of detailed operating budget forecasts, we haven't provided that for a few years now.
Okay. Oh, that now. So it was different. Like it was always. I recall it always being a summary and never really into too much detail. There was some stuff in there that we looked at for the next 3 years, but it wasn't that level of detail. Glenn, you're not asking for that level of detail, I don't think. But you're asking for
no, I think if the only information available is what's on operating 7, that simply says there's a property tax funding required of 5% for 2022 and 5% for 2023, I think a single-digit number for an entire year in the future seems too high level. It's really not. You could have put 4 or 7 in there; it wouldn't mean anything.
Okay, I guess. And where I'm trying to go is what a 10-year looks like, and a 10-year to me would be really high level.
No, the 10-year we're talking about the capital budget only, so that people can see the large capital projects coming down the pipe that are beyond that 3-year period.
Mm-hmm. I'm interested in what that 10-year would look like, what it would do, what it would help. Anybody in terms of like yourself and the Brantford Board of Trade and anyone else, I'm interested in seeing something like that. Maybe that's a request that we can make once this budget's done. And David, I'll look to you to see if you can take that away to maybe come back at a future council meeting to kind of lay that out to see how we can make that happen. Mr. Barrett, sorry.
Well, thanks, Councillor. Yes, that's fine. We certainly can.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you again, Glenn, for delegating again.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you through you, Mayor, and thank you again for the Brampton Board of Trade's presentation. Every year, I think certainly they, I always look forward to their budget delegations, and I know they're always very informative, and notwithstanding putting forth a position that I seem to learn something all the time. And I was really curious and actually really liked hearing when you talked about putting putting some money away when it comes to those big capital projects, and you listed the LRT and the second one, you know, I forget, but I do think you've touched on something that us going through a council workshop just recently, looking at how we sort of collaborate our priorities. And, you know, one of the frustrations I think that across the board that, you know, councillors are feeling is how do we communicate that we've sort of moved the goalposts? How do we communicate? There's been all excellent work across the board, and kudos to staff and to our new leadership and so on. And I know everyone with COVID, there's been a little bit of there's been a little bit of sidetracking, but we are still focused on those projects. But I think, you know, you're sort of what you've sort of challenged this council to do is really put our money where our mouth is and really send a signal to those other levels of government that, you know, if we certainly want to ask for these type of investments, we also have to show some seriousness in that as well, and that's just not us showing action as well. So I've taken it as that. Is that the right interpretation, or am I missing the boat on that?
No, I think you're correct. I think the idea is that none of us expect that we're going to have an LRT built to downtown or a new hospital built without a contribution from local taxpayers. And we think that by showing in a long-term plan that, you know, Brampton will have some skin in the game here. We're seriously planning about that LRT to downtown, that it makes it easier to get funding because you're already planning for how you're going to fund a portion of it. And obviously the numbers are very high level at this stage. What portions get paid for by whom are at a very high level. But if we identify that those projects exist, like Riverwalk is a very good example, it makes it easier, we think, to ask for funding because you've already got the plan in place for your share or part of your share going forward.
No, and that's excellent. And when you talk about sort of the reserve contributions, you know, I think that really we take that under advisement as well, because again, as far as I was or what I thought when we make these decisions, that because we do have received awards for our contributions, our healthy reserves, but I think your point is well taken, is that it just seems that maybe, again, and after I think with staff in this council, it really gives me a sober second thought, especially for on the last day of count, or the last day when we actually make decisions on the budget, to really look at what is that adequate number and look at that comparison. And I guess to Mark Medeiros, you will take that as sort of under consideration to really be able to report back to council in terms of our reserve contributions. How do we sort of look, you know, how do we compare with other jurisdictions? Because I do think, you know, and I think to my good friend and colleague, Councillor Vicente, who's always so passionate about the LRT bringing it to the downtown and et cetera, that we haven't put any real sort of skin in the game. You know, we've probably having a dedicated sort of a financial instrument dedicated towards that really sort of shows a seriousness and helps us to budget accordingly. So that I really appreciate. But I guess to Mark then, is that something that we'd be able to do?
Through the chair, yeah, we are 100% in alignment with the Brampton Board of Trade, and you know, the CAO will be part of his presentation later this evening. Will include some further discussion about the contributions to reserves. But as we presented in the corporate overview, like, we're well aware that our reserve levels are healthy. We are at the top end of contributions to reserves for maintaining infrastructure compared to other municipalities. So it's definitely an opportunity for council to consider, and we'll be talking about that later on this evening.
No, and thank you. And I guess my last question to the Brampton Board of Trade, since I've been on council, and I say this respectfully and in tongue in cheek, every year, usually when I look forward to your presentations, there seems to always be, the line, let's freeze taxes or let's, and I understand the burden on small business and I understand, the position of the organization, but that seems to be always sort of the standard sort of language in terms of always ensuring, lessening the burden when it comes from a tax perspective. I guess my question regarding, and you've identified some key investments, but in terms of us on the sort of more of a medium long-term outlook, as we keep giving zeros, and I understand this year more than ever is in a year where we should all tighten our belts, but increasingly, over the last couple of years, we've produced a zero, and we understand there's a regional portion, and we move forward. But to me, I'm always afraid, and help me understand that one day that we're going to reach that wall where staff are going to come to us and say, well, now it's time to pay the piper, and now we have to start looking at some big increases, and we've seen that through sort of Mississauga, where now their aging infrastructure, last year they had a large hit. I think this year is not going to be as much. But in terms of moving forward, how sustainable it is for us to increasingly on a yearly basis keep sort of going towards zero or to the bare minimum, especially when you talk about a high growth community, transit growth through the roof, all these other sort of amenities, and notwithstanding these projects. So just, maybe provide us some sort of a glimpse into the future.
I think you're absolutely right that you cannot freeze taxes indefinitely. That clearly does not make sense in an inflationary environment. If you go back a number of years, the city was repeatedly having surpluses every year, which was building up the general rate stabilization reserve. So some of the recommendations 3 or 4 years ago was recognizing that we could stop some of the increases to really refocus and not have all those surpluses. And so that's taken place, I think. You've rejigged the budget the last couple of years, and that's allowed you to freeze taxes. Last year, you introduced the stormwater management fee, that $22 million charge that doesn't show up as a property tax increase, but it's definitely paid for by taxpayers. And so that's a contribution to reserve that didn't happen before. And again, that's why we were suggesting the last year, perhaps freeze the increase of the contributions to reserves. So between those two items, I think that's allowed you to freeze taxes the last couple of years, and we think you can probably do it another year and maybe another 2 years. We don't know. But we don't know what the pandemic's going to hold for us in the future. But that's the reason we've been able to make those recommendations the last few years, and we think it's sustainable. But we're certainly not saying that you can go the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years without a tax increase. That's not going to happen, obviously.
Yeah, no, and I thank you very much. And I think that, one of the points that when you first opened up your introduction and looked at, for example, our staffing and in terms of, really looking at how, as an organization, how we do business, one thing that's interesting that COVID has really forced us to look at looking IT and finding productivity, finding efficiencies, and what does that mean for the future? And I think, this budget hopefully reflects the fact that some of these sort of investments that we're having in technology, where we're finding some of this productivity gains and efficiencies, that should translate into overall savings moving forward. And without a COVID, without that sort of budget, or without that pressure, are we going to move back to sort of old habits? And so I certainly think that we have an opportunity to move forward and become, and we're pretty lean as it is. But I think we do have an opportunity, and I thank you again, because again, notwithstanding always a great contribution by BOT, it also challenges us to really look inwards on some of the assumptions we make, and I thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you very much, and I appreciate all your time.
Thank you, Councillor Medeiros, for those thoughtful questions. Councillor Willand.
Yeah, thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Glenn and Vanessa, for coming in to represent the Board of Trade. Since just a quick question for Glenn, maybe you can take it offline later. I know because the Board of Trade's primary focus is being the voice of business. And today it's today at the Auto Mayors meeting, I represented the mayor for the big auto workers because we do have Kreisman in Brampton here, and there's Oakville with Ford, and we got GM out in Oshawa. And one of the mayors came up. They talked about creating a working group to create a holistic approach to the tax rate by working with MPAC and to adjust the municipal tax rate for businesses, so large businesses, small businesses, without affecting the residential tax base. So I don't want to get into big details today with it, but that would be something, Glenn, maybe we could reach out to you later on, and maybe through the mayor's office, you can assist if this working group gets going.
Sure, we can certainly assist with anything you'd like us to assist with.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks very much.
Okay, so that, are there any other questions? I don't see any right now. That'll take us to our next delegation. We'll thank the Board of Trade.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Mr. Mayor,
Peter.
members of Budget Committee, the next delegation is from Azad Goyat. Azad, I've just brought you into the session. You can unmute your microphone and address the committee. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Oh, sorry, Azad, you just muted your microphone again. You're unmuted now. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. Good evening. This is Azad Goyat, and my presentation is short, but may need little short extension too. Thanks, Your Worship Mayor Brown and Council and staff accepting my delegation on the behalf of Wales of Humber at Brampton First Foundation. Let me say, our city, our pride, Brampton First. Thank you, Mayor Patrick Brown and Council for tax praise for the last 2 years in a row. This is true that Brampton is the fastest growing, 9th largest city with a population of over 700,000 and youngest city of Canada. Brampton has good strength. We have mayor, we have 5 MPPs and 10 councillors, and almost all of the federal representatives are in second term, or same is the case for municipal level. Sorry. Most of our council members are serving Brampton since long time, their second term or third term or so on, but Brampton has already been ignored by all party colors in decade, whether it's red color, blue color, orange color, and we all know why we are ignored. That's why we are paying higher property tax and less services in Brampton. As we know, the purpose of property tax collection is to generate revenue for cities. Individual city council generally set it at a rate that will bring in sufficient cash to flow their operating cost. We also know that cities with high valued local real estate and larger population generally have more leeway on keeping the tax rate low. Brampton is not a small town. We are the 9th largest municipality of Canada. As the real estate prices and property assessment values are increased in largest towns, so the property tax revenue giving council the ability to keep the rate low. As we have seen, Toronto is paying the lowest property tax rate out of 35 municipalities in Ontario, which is 0.599704% in 2020. Similarly is the case for Markham and Richmond Hill. These two municipalities that round out the regions where property tax rates are lowest. It's only 0.628191% for Markham and 0.653108% in Richmond Hill. So if $1 million house in these properties, they are paying lower taxes compared to Brampton. Why we are paying this higher property tax in Brampton? Because Brampton has low commercial to residential tax ratio, which is a key to reduce the property tax. We have seen in the past trends and in the current 2020 trend too, Brampton is at number 13. We have 12 cities above Brampton which are paying less property taxes. Let's compare. have a property of 500,000 in Brampton, just 500,000. No house is less than 500,000 in Brampton. Toronto is paying only $2,999 annual property tax, and Brampton residents are paying $4,767. Let's go to the $1 million house, property assessed at $1 million. Toronto is paying $5,997, and even Mississauga is paying $7,860. But we Bramptonians are paying $9,533. This is not fair. So Bramptonian doesn't mind to pay the property taxes comparing neighboring cities, including Toronto, Markham, Richmond Hill, and even Mississauga or Caledon. But what facility or services we are getting? Are we getting the comparison facility in to those 12 cities? They are paying less property tax and they are getting better services and better facility. That's why Brampton is known as Sleep City. Council, your slogan is Brampton mean business, but we, the Brampton residents, are forced to work outside Brampton. Even our residents are forced to demonstrate to save the commercial zoning. Even the local councillor is openly supporting the developer or builder lobby. I'm talking about the McQueen and Cottrell Corner, where repeated attempts are being made to change the commercial zoning to multi-story residential building. Brampton means business. Where we stand now, we are titled as Sleep City. As builder, developer has easy access to councillor, city hall, and just developing housing with small corner retail store plaza all over Brampton. Even converting commercial to residential zone. It's a time to follow the model of neighboring GTA cities and invite commercial and businesses to invest in Brampton. When Waterloo can have a Google headquarters, why not Brampton? It's a time to work for Brampton. Only the day and night, COVID should not be hurdle. Time never stops. Efforts never stop. This way we can reduce the residential property tax. Council, please save the land for future commercial use. Be smart, play smart. As soon as in GTA, there is no land availability, Brampton will have the opportunity and future businesses have no choice, just only and only option to invest in Brampton. Explore this option. I'm sure we can change the Brampton status from sleep city to business city, and obviously our property taxes will be low. Due to the second wave of COVID-19, residents are in panic. Brampton is under lockdown, and there are great chances this lockdown will continue. Moreover, businesses are dying nowadays, residents are getting laid off or having reduced working hours, and unemployment is record high. Council, let me know how residents can afford any increase, rather it's a time to decrease. What current services we are getting compared to the other 12 cities who are paying less property tax than Brampton. In Brampton, we are already in healthcare emergency since pre-pandemic. We are not getting the fair share in healthcare funding. We are getting $1,000 less than provincial average. This is unfair. Hospital. What services Brampton residents are getting? Why to pay? They should pay more property tax when there is just one full service hospital, and we don't know the status of the second hospital. It's an announcement, but when this announcement will be a real dream, we don't know. We are hoping the better health and hospital in Brampton, and this second hospital will not be enough. Even after this second phase is completed, Brampton residents will still have the poor healthcare services. We need the third hospital. We are the taxpayer. If we are paying taxes, we need the services. Other 12 cities, they have the better healthcare services.
Azad, go ahead. The clerk just informed me we are beyond the 5-minute allocation.
So give me 2 more minutes, and I'm almost concluding it.
We'll give you 10 seconds to wrap up.
Oh, 10 seconds. Okay. Same thing, the post-secondary education. What services we are getting in post-secondary education? There is no university. Same like transit and infrastructure. Gridlock. The only solution is to bring the more funding. If the funding is brought in Brampton, Brampton will have the better future, a better city, and we will get out from this slave city to the business city. And let me wrap it in one line. We can afford a single cent toward this proposed increase in property tax, provide comparable services first, time for result. Our city, our pride, Brampton first. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Okay, thank you, Azad Goyet. We have some questions. We have Councillor Fortini.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Azad. You mentioned some local council supporting a developer. Could you make it more clear? Which one am I supporting, or was it me? Who did you mention?
Like in your ward, you know, there are two councillors. So this
Right.
issue is from your ward, and over there, you know, the McQueen and Cottrell Plaza. This piece of land is meant for commercial plaza only.
No,
So
that's not what I'm asking you. You said I'm supporting a developer. Was it me you're talking about?
No, I'm not talking because you already supported the residents while we had the previous meeting.
Okay, so
That
you
was
should
go
make it.
through
You
and
should
there was a
make.
big delegation.
Yeah, thank you. You should make it clear because I got to just think that I was supporting the developer. I don't even know.
You are.
And you guys, I'm going to take the chair back here. This is a budget meeting, and we can save these discussions for planning meeting. I know Councillor Fortini wanted to raise a point of personal privilege because it could have been referred to him, and that's fair. But let's keep the planning questions for planning meeting, not and let's try to keep this to budget questions. Councillor Fortini, is there any follow-up questions for the deputant?
No, I want to just thank him. I just wanted to get that cleared because I don't even know the developer, and I thought he was mentioning me. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you, Azad. I don't see any other questions, so we can go to our next deputation.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Thank you, and Council. Thank you.
I believe our next deputation is Jasmine Moulton. Jasmine Moulton from the Ontario Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation.
So Jasmine, you are in the session now, excuse me, and you can unmute your microphone and please address the committee.
Wonderful. Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for the opportunity to speak tonight on behalf of concerned taxpayers in Brampton. My name is Jasmine Moulton, and I'm the Ontario Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. The CTF is a nonpartisan citizens advocacy group fighting for lower taxes, less waste, and more accountable government. We have hundreds of thousands of supporters across the country, including thousands right here in Brampton. By now, you've probably heard many requests for more money, but I'm here tonight to ask you to remember where that money comes from. It's not the government's money. It's taxpayers' money. Families and businesses are struggling through the worst economic downturn on record. Yet, what is the single greatest cost faced by the average Canadian family? It's not housing. It's not even other essentials such as food or clothing. It's taxes. In 2019, the average Canadian family spent 45% of its income on taxes to all levels of government. They didn't start keeping the money they earned until June 14th last year. But your tax base is hurting. In Peel region, the unemployment rate soared to a record high at 16%. Peel's youth unemployment rate rose even higher to 36%. According to the Financial Accountability Office of Ontario, 9 out of 10 provincial job losses happened outside of government by those working in the private sector or by the self-employed. Instead of raising taxes, the government of Brampton should be tightening its belt and reducing spending like those who pay your salaries have been forced to do. The budget states that Brampton's already received $35 million in COVID supports from the federal and provincial government so far and wants more. But let me remind honorable councillors, there are 3 levels of government, but there's only one taxpayer footing the bill. Those other 2 levels of government are broke. Ontario's debt is approaching $400 billion, and the federal government's debt will soon surpass $1 trillion. Each Ontarian's individual share of those debts amounts to $50,000. That's $200,000 in government debt owing for a family of 4. Of course, those debts will eventually need to be repaid. Debt today means taxes tomorrow. So governments at all levels must reduce their spending now to reduce the debt burden being passed on to future generations. But Brampton's proposed budget for 2021 does the opposite. Total operational expenditure is increasing by 2.9% over 2020 levels. That's 22.1 million you're extracting from the pockets of struggling taxpayers. What's worse is the plan to grow the size of government while the tax base shrinks. I was shocked to see that the city actually plans to hire 44 new staff in 2021. There are fewer taxpayers left holding up the massive and growing governmental overhead. It's not sustainable, and it's not wise to increase the burden on taxpayers who are struggling right now to get back on their feet. Government employee compensation is the single largest area of operating expenditure by the Brampton government, with labor costs representing 57% of all spending in 2021. If this budget is passed, the cost of government employees will increase by 3.2%, or nearly $14 million. But the tax grabs don't stop there. The proposed budget would take another $14.8 million out of taxpayers' pockets next year by increasing property tax rates by $9.8 million, while assessment growth will put a further $5 million in government coffers. But Brampton's property taxes are already high enough. There's plenty of room for improvement. There are 12 cities nearby with lower property taxes, including Mississauga and Calaton, the other two municipalities in the region of Peel. The proposed budget for 2021 says that the average household will pay $120 in increased taxes next year, but that's based on a residence valued at $538,000. The average price of a single detached home in Brampton is selling for, or just reached, $989,000 in August of this year, according to Zoocasa. In conclusion, tax hikes are the last thing that struggling families and businesses need right now. Taxpayers need tax relief. The government of Brampton must tighten its belt and get its spending under control. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jasmine, for the presentation. I don't believe there are any questions, but appreciate you being a passionate voice for taxpayers in Brampton, and your deputation will be noted and kept as part of our record as we go through our budget deliberations.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So this completes the deputations for this evening, and I know members, particularly members of Regional Council, have had a long day. We've been going since 9:30 in the morning, and since we've dealt with the business today, I think it's fair to adjourn a budget committee. And Peter, when would we be recommencing? Oh, I guess there's a public question period. Are there any public questions? Peter?
Mr. Chair, we have not received any public questions for tonight's session.
Okay. On that note, then the next meeting will be Monday at 9:30 a.m.
Did we lose something?
That's correct.
Okay.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, sorry, we should have a motion just to receive the delegations, the three tonight.
Okay.
There is a set of correspondence, but that correspondence will be growing, and I'll suggest we deal with the correspondence at the next session, but we can receive the three delegations this evening.
Okay, as your suggestion. Moved by Councillor Vicente, seconded by Councillor Fortini. Are there anyone opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries.
So, Mr. Mayor, with no further business, then the committee can, at your decision, recess to reconvene at 9:30 a.m. on Monday, November 30th.
Okay.
And just
Thank
to
you,
recap,
members of council. Yeah.
Sorry, I just wish to advise that Budget Committee is scheduled to go from 9:30 till 4 all day on Monday, if necessary, Monday evening, and if necessary, to continue budget deliberations on Tuesday, December 1st, from 1 till 4 and 7 till 9.
We have made good progress, though, with the deputations and the departmental presentations, so hopefully it doesn't take up the entirety of that time. I'm optimistic we'll be able to continue to make steady progress. So that we're now adjourned until 9:30 a.m.